If you mapped the unknown regions, they wouldn't be unknown anymore. You'd have to call them something else. So here's the question nobody at the Republic's cartography office apparently ever asked. Why, after 25,000 years of galactic civilization, does Star Wars still call them unknown? That isn't rhetorical throat clearing. That's the opening statement of a prosecution. Because the unknown regions aren't mysterious. They're misnamed. They've been misnamed for thousands of years. The regions in question contain a functioning interstellar government with its own navy, its own maps, and its own name for the territory. They contain a hidden Sith planet stocked with a world-ending fleet. They contain an invasion corridor that an extragalactic species used as a highway, and a 30-year shadow military buildup that secretly replaced the Galactic Empire. None of that is unknown. At worst, it's classified. At best, it's a clerical error the size of a galaxy. And the detail that makes this genuinely strange, the one the competitor's 30-minute video on this topic never touched, is that there's a second category of unexplored space in Star Wars sitting right next to the problem. Genuinely off the map, truly uncharted, no documented civilizations, no Sith strongholds, no invasion corridors. And Star Wars calls that one wild space. The boring name went on the dangerous, inhabited, Sith-infested territory. The evocative, frontier name went on the genuinely empty one. The franchise got the labels backwards, and it apparently took a YouTube comment section to notice. We're going to fix that. The Galactic Republic was founded approximately 25,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. This holds in both canon and legends. The Star Wars book places the founding at roughly 25,000 BBY. The Legends timeline gets more specific, 25,053 BBY, with the signing of the Galactic Constitution and Coruscant established as the government's capital. 22 core worlds, including Alderaan, form the founding union. Standard origin story. But the label attached to the Republic's founding era is worth reading carefully. It wasn't called the Consolidation Period. It wasn't called the Administrative Organization Period. It was called the Expansionist Period. The Republic was mapping and colonizing the galaxy before the bureaucracy even had furniture. And in the Legends timeline, the Prelemian trade route, a functioning hyperlane linking Coruscant to Ossus and the Tyon cluster, was established simultaneously. Day one of galactic civilization, and there was already a working hyperlane. The cartographic infrastructure wasn't something the Republic had to build. It came with the founding package. 25,000 years later, on the official galactic map, there was still a section labeled Unknown. Not Unmapped Interior. Not Dangerous Territory. Not Difficult Navigation Zone. Not Restricted. Unknown. As in, the cartography department looked at this section of the galaxy, wrote unknown, filed it in the eventually folder, and eventually never arrived. The math on this is worth sitting with for exactly 1 second. 25,000 years is longer than all of recorded human history, from the earliest cuneiform tablets to right now. And then that same span again, stacked on top. A civilization with working faster than light travel, computation capable of calculating hyperspace trajectories, and an explicitly expansionist charter had the rough equivalent of 2 full human civilizations' worth of time to update a file name. The file name didn't update. What makes this more than a comedy of bureaucratic inertia is what was actually there, inside the borders of the unknown regions, the entire time. The Chiss are tall, blue-skinned near-humans from the planet Chilla. Chilla sits inside the unknown regions. Their government, the Chiss Ascendancy, sometimes called Chiss Space by outsiders, has a documented history going back to at least 5,100 BBY, when the great families united under the Stybla as the first ruling family. That date puts established Chiss civilization inside the unknown regions, approximately 5,000 years before the prequel era, and roughly 20,000 years after the Republic founded itself next door. The Republic's expansionist period was apparently oriented away from whatever direction Chilla was in. The Chiss Ascendancy had 28 populated worlds. It had a legal framework. The Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet operated under laws explicitly prohibiting preemptive military strikes. Laws. Written constraints on military behavior. This isn't a collection of cave dwellers stumbled across during a mapping accident. It's a civilization with constitutional governance, a standing military, and enough political infrastructure to have defined rules of engagement for an army. In 5019 BBY, the Chiss began exploring outside their core territory. They called the surrounding space the Chaos. That designation matters more than it might seem. The Chiss didn't call their home unknown. They called it chaotic, treacherous, turbulent. They were naming the conditions, not confessing ignorance. The Republic's unknown label implies nobody has any information about the place. The Chiss Chaos label says, we know exactly what's here, it's just very difficult to navigate. Those are fundamentally different epistemological positions, and the Chiss arrived at the accurate one about 20,000 years before anyone from the core bothered to check. The Chiss Expansionary Defense Force was divided into two distinct subdivisions. The Expansionary Fleet handled both frontier patrols and exploratory missions into the Chaos. A standing military force inside the unknown regions, with dedicated resources for exploration. While the broader galaxy files this space under "we don't know," the inhabitants maintain a standing exploratory navy. The irony isn't subtle, it's structural. Their navigational solution is called the Skywalkers, Ozili Esahembo. Force-sensitive Chiss navigators, typically female, who used precognitive force abilities to read hyperspace conditions in real time. Timothy Zahn introduced them into canon through the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, 3 novels set almost entirely inside Chiss Ascendancy politics and military operations. And the detail that makes them dramatically important isn't just that they exist, but how they work. Skywalker abilities faded with age. The Chiss didn't maintain a core of veteran navigators who'd mastered the technique over decades. They maintained a rotating supply of young navigators, cycling them through service while their abilities were active, and retiring them when those abilities dimmed. You couldn't transfer the skill to a droid. You couldn't standardize it into a navigation algorithm. It was personal, perishable, and irreplaceable, which is exactly why it solved the Chiss problem without solving anyone else's. The Chiss had navigable routes extending outward from the Ascendancy's core territory in all directions. Hyperlanes through regions the broader galaxy couldn't reach by conventional means. The people living in the unknown regions had more mapped routes through the unknown regions than the civilization that named them unknown. Now enter Grand Admiral Thrawn, Mithra Nuruodo, Chiss military officer, tactical genius, and the most operationally dangerous commander in the Imperial Navy in both legends and canon. Thrawn leaves Chiss space. He integrates into the Imperial hierarchy. He commands fleets. He receives intelligence briefings. He sits in war rooms on star destroyers, planning the pacification of Outer Rim systems. His commanding officers recruited him. They knew where he came from. The Empire, during his entire tenure, had a Chiss Grand Admiral in active service, which means it had a direct human connection to the civilization living inside the unknown regions. The Imperial cartography files were apparently not updated. In Timothy Zahn's Outbound Flight, a Legends novel set during the prequel era, the Republic attempted its most serious official push into the unknown regions. The Outbound Flight project sent a vessel into that territory. The Chiss didn't just exist there while this happened. A young Thrawn was directly involved when the mission encountered Chiss forces. The Republic made physical contact with a civilization in the unknown regions during the prequel era. Whatever intelligence returned from that contact didn't result in the label changing. That last part has a specific reason, and it isn't administrative delay. Before we get to Palpatine's preferred filing system, we need to deal with the more fundamental question buried in the franchise's cartography. Why does unknown regions exist as a category at all when wild space is right there? This is the argument the competitor's video didn't make. It's also the argument with the most direct audience demand, a comment capturing the feeling precisely. The unknown regions and wild space should have their names swapped. The in-universe definitions, when you actually lay them out, make that argument look less like a fan grumble and more like a genuine cartographic error. The unknown regions sit within the mapped borders of the galaxy. Pull up any galactic map in Star Wars, and the unknown regions are visible. A labeled territory, rough boundaries indicated, a section of the galactic interior that has a name and an approximate location. The problem isn't that nobody knows these territories exist. It's that their interior contents are dangerous, navigation hostile, and resistant to standard hyperspace plotting. The jar is on the shelf. You can see it. You just can't read the label because the room it's in is on fire and the floor is missing. Wild space is different in a specific way. Wild space sits beyond the outer rim, off the edge of the galactic map entirely. Not a labeled region inside the map's borders, the space where the map runs out. No documented civilizations on record. No charted Sith strongholds. No mapped invasion corridors. Pablo Hidalgo, of the Lucasfilm Story Group, addressed this distinction explicitly in official commentary. Wild space exists outside the known galactic map, off the edge entirely, while the unknown regions exist within mapped borders but have inaccessible or unknown interior contents. Two different relationships between galactic civilization and unexplored space. Apply that distinction to the names in use, and the problem becomes structural. Wild space is the frontier, beyond the rim, the edge of everything, where the map stops. That territory is genuinely, honestly, accurately unknown, in the specific sense that nobody has charted it, nobody has documented what lives there, and the galactic civilization doesn't even have the borders mapped. If any region in Star Wars deserves to be called unknown, it's wild space. It earns the name by definition. The unknown regions, meanwhile, are known to exist. Their approximate location on the galactic map is visible to any navigator who buys a standard chart. The Chiss Ascendancy has been operating a government inside them since 5100 BBY. The Sith have had a base there for decades. Multiple invasion species have transited through them. What the unknown regions are isn't unknown. What they are is dangerous, chaotic, and resistant to the technology that standard galactic civilization uses to navigate space. They're not an epistemological blank. They're a traversal challenge. That's not unknown. That's wild. Turbulent. Uncivilized by core world standards. Full of things that will kill you if you visit without preparation. Wild is the more accurate word by a considerable margin. The name wild space fits the unknown regions better than the name unknown regions does. The name unknown regions fits wild space better than the name wild space does. At some point in the Republic's 25,000-year expansionist period, someone in the cartography office labeled the dangerous interior unknown, which was fair at 25,000 BBY when it genuinely was unknown, and labeled the genuine frontier beyond the map wild, which is a fine word, but the wrong word for that territory. Nobody corrected either one. The swap argument has one limit worth acknowledging. Pablo Hidalgo's clarification makes clear the two names encode a real epistemological distinction. The unknown regions are a known unknown. We know they're there, we just don't know their contents. And wild space is an unknown unknown. We don't even have the shape of the territory mapped. The naming convention isn't purely random. It does encode something real about the relationship between the map and the unexplored space. The problem is that the unknown regions stopped being a known unknown the moment the Chiss Ascendancy started governing them. And that moment was around 5100 BBY, approximately 20,000 years before anyone thought to revise the paperwork. You can have a logically consistent naming convention and still be applying the right name to the wrong place for 2,000 millennia. That's what happened. The convention was sound. The application went stale. What the unknown regions actually are, by the time of the main franchise events, is something like hostile interior territories, or restricted navigation zone, or chaotic space, which is what the Rebels characters actually called part of it, and which is a better name than unknown by every meaningful metric. The Chiss called it the chaos. That's closer. The regions aren't unknown. They're just very, very dangerous for anyone trying to navigate them from the outside without specialized help. And wild space, off the edge of the map, no documented contents, no civilizations on record, is sitting right there being called wild when it's the one piece of territory in the franchise that genuinely, accurately, without qualification, doesn't have a known population. The franchise named the wrong one unknown. It's been doing it for 25,000 in-universe years, and as long as the franchise has existed out of universe. The comments section noticed before the lore department did. At this point, someone watching is raising a specific objection. A galaxy is 99.9999% empty space. Modern astronomical software catalogs stellar positions automatically, builds predictive models centuries ahead, and does it on hardware that fits in a server room. The calculation for where every object in a galaxy will be at any given future time isn't conceptually impossible. It's a physics problem with well-understood mechanics. A civilization with hyperdrive-capable ships and astromech navigation computers, operating for 25,000 years, should have been able to brute force map the unknown regions through sheer accumulated observation. The objection has genuine force. Here's where the in-universe rules complicate the math in specific ways. Hyperspace navigation in Star Wars isn't an astronomy problem. Knowing where stars and planets are is the starting point, not the endpoint. A hyperspace jump requires calculating safe transit corridors between objects that avoid mass shadows, the gravitational footprint of every stellar body along the path. An incorrect calculation doesn't mean you arrive at the wrong place. It means the ship exits hyperspace inside a star, or inside an asteroid field, or doesn't exit at all. The consequences are immediate and final. Standard navigation handles this by calculating known, stable routes between known, stable obstacles. That system works because the obstacles don't move in operationally relevant timeframes. The unknown region's obstacles move. The region is separated from the broader galaxy by a combination of solar storms, rogue magnetospheres, black holes, and shifting gravity wells. Star Wars Rebels introduces a section of the unknown regions that its characters call chaotic space, stellar phenomena packed densely together, unpredictable in their behavior, and lethal to standard navigation equipment. The critical operational word is shifting. A gravity well that was in one position when a survey ship charted it may have moved by the time the next ship attempts to use that chart. A safe hyperspace lane that worked on one transit may collapse into a mass shadow problem on the next. Static obstacles are an engineering problem. You map them once, route around them, update the chart when they change significantly. Non-static obstacles that shift faster than survey missions can track. In a region where the cost of an outdated chart is a destroyed ship, that's a different class of problem. The standard astromech navigation computers that calculate hyperspace jumps in seconds for routine transit between core worlds can't solve this by simply running more calculations. The anomalies aren't more of what navicomputers are designed to handle. They're fundamentally different. Unpredictably dynamic in an environment where unpredictability is lethal. The Chiss Skywalker solution worked precisely because it wasn't pre-calculated. A Skywalker didn't plot a route in advance and then fly it. She felt where the lanes were stable at the moment of transit, reading hyperspace conditions through force precognition as the ship was moving through them. That's responsive navigation rather than predictive navigation. It works for a single ship with a single navigator on a route she's actively reading. It can't be uploaded to a fleet's navicomputer. It can't be scaled to a galaxy-wide survey project. And because Skywalker abilities faded with age, the Chiss couldn't even build a stable core of veteran navigators who'd accumulated experience over decades. The navigators were always young, always working at the edge of an ability that was already starting to dim. So the toaster objection fails in universe, but it fails for specific reasons. The mapping problem in the unknown regions isn't a storage or computation problem. It's a real-time prediction problem with catastrophic margin for error in a region where the physics being tracked changes faster than standard survey missions can follow. Modern astronomical catalogs work because stellar mechanics are stable over geological timescales. The unknown region's hyperspace hazards change over operational timescales. The difficulty is genuine. The name is still wrong. Those two things can both be true simultaneously, and they are. A single comment on the competitor's video pulled 171 likes. Just one sentence. I just figured the Galactic Civil War kept everyone busy. That one sentence outperformed entire dedicated sections of the competitor's 30-minute runtime. And it's worth understanding why the intuition behind it's correct, and also exactly where it runs out. The wars are real drains. The Clone Wars consumed 3 years, and the complete institutional apparatus of the Galactic Republic, then triggered the rise of an empire that had no interest in scientific exploration. The Galactic Civil War, from the Declaration of Rebellion through the Battle of Endor, and then the Battle of Jakku, occupied roughly 7 years of active military conflict. The New Republic spent its first decade absorbing former imperial territories, managing political fracture, and rebuilding destroyed infrastructure. An empire that was primarily focused on enslaving populations and suppressing rebellions wasn't sending survey ships into shifting hyperspace anomalies. Nobody is arguing otherwise. But the Civil War argument has a specific ceiling, and the ceiling is arithmetic. The Galactic Republic existed for approximately 25,000 years before the Clone Wars started. Even if you add every major conflict in the franchise's history and buffer generously for their aftermaths, you're looking at a few hundred years of conflict-justified exploration disruption out of a 25,000-year window. The wars explain a gap. They explain why nobody was exploring the unknown regions from roughly 22 BBY through 5 ABY. They don't explain why the same label persisted through the Republic's long, stable eras, the centuries between Sith wars, the prosperous middle periods, the decades of Jedi Order primacy. The Chiss Ascendancy was founded in 5100 BBY. The Republic had approximately 1,400 years between that date and the Sith Wars that began disrupting things in the Legends timeline. 1,400 stable years in which to make contact with a known civilization in the unknown space and update the file. In Legends, the first documented Chiss contact with wider galactic civilization came through an alliance with the Sith Empire around 3681 BBY during the Great Galactic War. The Republic had intelligence-adjacent information about a civilization inside the unknown regions, filtered through their main adversaries' diplomatic relationships, for more than 3,000 years before the prequel era. The wars made the naming failure worse. They didn't cause it. The failure was already old enough to vote before the first major galactic conflict complicated things. While the cartography department wasn't holding the meeting, the unknown regions were producing a fairly consistent body of evidence against the label. The Vagari, sentient slavers from inside the unknown regions, had built a small empire there, conquering and governing neighboring species across a considerable territory. The Siruk, a saurian species from the unknown regions, invaded the planet Bakura in 4 ABY, shortly after the Battle of Endor, arriving in known space with enough navigational precision to time their invasion to the exact moment the galaxy's major military powers were in maximum disarray. The Grisks, warlike and nomadic, operated through the Canon era at a threat level that drew Grand Admiral Thrawn's personal military attention across the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. 3 different species, 3 different eras, 3 different vectors out of the unknown regions into known space. In the Legends continuity, the Yuuzhan Vong, extragalactic in origin, having crossed intergalactic void to reach the galaxy, staged their full invasion of known space from the unknown regions around 25 ABY. They built a forward base there. They used it as an approach corridor. Thrawn in Legends had encountered them during his time in the unknown regions. meaning the Chiss military had developed intelligence on an incoming extragalactic invasion force that the broader galaxy failed to receive in time to prepare. An entire invading civilization used the unknown regions as a highway, from the staging depot all the way to the first contact with known space. These species aren't unknown phenomena. They're documented threats with documented behaviors. Documented because the survivors of their attacks came back and filed reports. The regions kept generating invasions across legends and canon alike, and the designation on the file never changed. Here is where the story stops being purely about bureaucratic incompetence and starts being about something more deliberate. Palpatine knew exactly where Exegol was. Exegol, recorded in ancient texts as Ixagol, was a dark desert planet inside the unknown regions, home to the Sith Eternal, a secret cult of true believers who had been operating there, in isolation, for decades. Reaching it required a Sith wayfinder, not just a navicomputer with extra processing power, a specialized device that encoded the specific, precise hyperspace route through the anomalies surrounding the planet. The existence of wayfinders as dedicated hardware for a single destination means someone mapped that route with enough accuracy to store it as a reproducible path. Palpatine, or the Sith lineage before him, did that mapping deliberately. Exegol wasn't a lucky discovery. It was a cartographic project. Beyond Exegol, Palpatine built an observatory on Jakku. The facility housed computers with a specific dedicated purpose, calculating safe hyperspace navigation paths through the unknown regions. Before his death at the Battle of Endor, those computers had identified a viable route through the region. That's not a man stumbling around in the dark with a flashlight. It's an independent, secret mapping program running parallel to the Empire's official navigation apparatus, producing exclusive route data that Palpatine controlled personally and distributed through a chain of loyal operatives. Then there is outbound flight. During the prequel era, the Republic launched the Outbound Flight Project, a vessel intended as the first major official exploratory mission into the unknown regions, the Republic's genuine attempt to close the cartographic gap. In Timothy Zahn's Legends novel, the picture that emerges is specific. Palpatine had never intended for outbound flight to make it through the unknown regions. The mission failed. The ship was destroyed. The Republic's best attempt to learn what was unknown about the unknown regions was eliminated during the watch of the man who would become Emperor. After Endor, the contingency plan activated. Imperial loyalists, resources, and long-term plans redirected systematically into the unknown regions. The First Order was constructed there in secret. Multiple shipyards, weapons factories, base installations, warships including Resurgent-class battlecruisers, all built in territory the New Republic officially knew nothing about. The construction ran for roughly 30 years. The First Order didn't reveal itself to known space until it destroyed the Hosnian system in 34 ABY. 30 years of secret military construction in unknown space. That operational security only works if the unknown label is actively doing something. An accurate designation, contested territory, adjacent to Chiss navigation routes, location of Imperial successor state, would have attracted Senate investigation. Unknown closes the inquiry before it opens. You can't send a committee to investigate a place you officially know nothing about. The New Republic, operating in good faith on the existing cartographic record, had no institutional mechanism to question the unknown region's status, because the category itself declared there was no status to question. Whether Palpatine deliberately maintained the unknown designation as cover, or simply inherited and methodically exploited an existing bureaucratic vacancy, the functional result is identical. The galaxy's most operationally significant corridor of space spent the entire Imperial era and the subsequent New Republic era as a cartographic non-event. And the man running a secret Sith resurrection project inside it, with private maps to a planet only he could reach, had every possible reason to leave the file marked unknown. The Chiss called their home the Chaos because they knew exactly what was there. They just acknowledged it was hard to navigate. Palpatine called it unknown because an accurate name would have complicated his calendar considerably. So why does Star Wars still call the unknown regions unknown? The in-universe obstacles are real. Solar storms, rogue magnetospheres, black holes, shifting gravity wells, chaotic space. These mechanisms genuinely explain why standard galactic civilization couldn't brute force survey the region over 25,000 years. The Skywalker solution worked for the Chiss because it was localized, force-dependent, and couldn't scale beyond individuals with a specific ability that faded before they turned 30. The major wars were genuine drains on exploratory capacity, even if they covered only a fraction of the relevant timeline. The navigation problem is harder than simply pointing a droid at it. But none of that makes unknown accurate. Unknown makes a specific cartographic claim. We don't know this exists. The map is blank. There is no data. That claim fails the moment the Chiss Ascendancy shows up with 28 populated worlds, an exploratory navy, and a legal system. And it shows up at 5,100 BBY. A region with a government isn't unknown. A region where Palpatine ran a decades-long resurrection project isn't unknown. It's classified. A region that produced 3 separate invasion events across legends and canon isn't unknown. It's a security problem. Dangerous regions would have been accurate. Restricted navigation zone would have been accurate. The chaos, the Chiss designation, would have been accurate. Unknown was accurate for about 5 minutes in 25,000 BBY and hasn't been accurate since. The Republic's cartography office wrote the label during the expansionist period, when these regions genuinely were blank on the chart, and then apparently never scheduled the follow-up meeting. Somewhere in 25,000 years of galactic civilization, someone should have written the memo. The unknown regions are apparently not entirely unknown. We made contact with a government there approximately 20,000 years ago. We are changing the name to something more accurate. Please update your charts before an extragalactic invasion species uses the unknown designation as cover for a 30-year military buildup. The memo never went out. And the final irony, the one sitting right there on the same galactic map the whole time, is wild space. Off the edge of the map entirely. No documented civilizations. No charted Sith strongholds. No invasion corridors on record. Genuinely, accurately, honestly unknown, and named Wild. The franchise gave the evocative frontier name to the empty territory, and the epistemically loaded name to the inhabited, dangerous, Sith-infested, repeatedly invaded from one. And it has been doing this for 25,000 in-universe years, without anyone in the cartography office noticing. The Chiss mapped it. The Sith built a fleet there. An extragalactic invasion species used it as a highway. The First Order ran a 30-year Shadow Arms program inside it, assembled a fleet, and destroyed the New Republic with it. The galaxy's official position is still unknown. The real unknown isn't the regions. It's why nobody in the Republic's cartography office ever had the meeting. Wild space was right there the whole time, with a name that fits, waiting for someone to swap the labels. Subscribe for more cases where the galaxy gets its own paperwork completely wrong.